Welcome back. It's 15:15 now. We've got about half an hour for questions. So we'll be asked. So I've got some questions that we've been dying to ask our panelists, but also do join us after that. So firstly. Steve and Rosalie, both of you have illustrated the unique position that South Korea has in the global art market. We've looked at many of the key factors in this development. Can we just have a quick recap from perhaps first you, Stephen, and then Rosalie, as to what these key factors in the development might have been? Perhaps Rosalie first.
I think, generally speaking, I'm not I'm not a global art market expert, so it's a perception from the outside. But I think Korea is where it is today for various reasons, and I think we can first take the resilience of Korea when facing different sort of cultural influences, willingly or not. It's understanding how, as a matter of survival, you are just absorbing it and turning it to your advantage. Then there is also the sort of embrace of the technology and taking the gamble of actually setting all of your country into that kind of high-tech path when the others were not taking the risk yet. And South Korea was also one of the first 4 Asian tigers or dragons to realize that in order to be an economically developed country, just having a democracy and an economy was not enough. You had to have a cultural identity. And I think in the 1990s, when they made this realization, they really quickly started to make sure that they were represented overseas. So you see in Western museums, especially in Europe and in the US, a flurry of Korean galleries opening in Western museums. And domestically, you also have the government starting to put incentives, financial incentives for collectors and corporate companies to actually buy or establish Korean contemporary art. So you see, for example, Lium, Art Sonje. So Lium is the museum of Samsung, Art Sonje is the museum of Daewoo, Taerim Cultural Foundations. All of these are coming around that time period. And this is not stopping just there. The Korean government is also, and it's not the central government only, but it's also regional government, metropolitan government that are also putting monies towards creating platforms for contemporary art, from the Gwangju Biennale to the Busan Biennale, the Busan Film Festival. So it really varies. And I think there were not enough contemporary artists from Korea at the time per se to fill all of these museums and platforms. But I think in the same way they had done it with the gamble of internet, they have been just putting the monies and then following, it will just come. And I think all of this put together meant that Korea seems to be where it is today.
Steve, are there any particular factors, perhaps globally or certainly outside Korea, that have helped this?
I mean, there definitely are. I think the only thing I'd add to, or to embellish what Rosalie said as well, is one of the extraordinary things that almost no other country has is no tax on art purchases under $45,000, which, again, using, actually looking forward and saying, this is what will encourage people to buy, particularly Korean art, but and that doesn't extend, say, to photographs and prints and editions, which would generally be more likely to come from other markets and other, produced elsewhere, and that's been really powerful. But I think it's been a question of active, really active sort of approach from the government, but also the good. The fact that so much has happened, particularly on the Asian markets, but had China been less obsessed with censorship, then Shanghai would probably have quickly become the centre of the contemporary art market in the sort of mid-noughties. And then when Hong Kong, spent a decade being the chosen centre of the art market for Asia, the security laws now mean that is absolutely, it's not disappearing. The auction houses are still there, and there's various other things, but it's very interesting to see that, I think there are, as you said, incentives for, that now that Christie's and Sotheby's have established themselves in Seoul, it's an uncomfortable truth that it's somewhat illegal to do a lot of things art-wise in Hong Kong, and in Singapore it's often considered to be slightly immoral. So, you've actually got a free, being ready and in the right place when your competitors fall is, I think, one of the reasons why it's worked so well.
Fascinating. Yes, really fascinating. Thank you. Rosalie, I'd love to, before we'll hear from the artists at the end, but it's quite interesting to start the discussion. Are there things that you are seeing already that were perhaps not picked up in the original exhibition, the Korean Wave, that you think you would put in now? Are things continuing at such a pace, or is it a refining?
I think they are continuing to evolve, but not perhaps in the linear manner that we all think. And there are some crossover. For example, the entertainment industries work together sometimes with the sports industries or the TV dramas industries, and the sort of the race for the metaverse was quite strong up to a couple of years ago. Until the AI came to the fore, and I think those kind of input will have an impact on the way the development will continue. But on the non-analog side, on the non-digital side, on the analog side, there is also, for example, Hangang, who has received the Nobel Prize for Literature. So there are other sort of aspects and fields where Korea is just pushing its culture. And I think the craft section is also something that is quite growing in comparison to the art world as well. If you're looking at, for example, the Loewe Craft Prize, in the past sort of iterations, out of 30 finalists, 5 were Koreans. And if you think about a population that is only about 50 million people, it's a huge number out. And more of those crafts are being also incorporated into the art world, which is quite an interesting sort of development, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting that, having got to a point where every blue chip dealer needs a dansei artist on their roster, we're now beginning to the point where they need a ceramicist and a moonjar creator on their list too. So, yeah.
Yes, the moonjar has been one of those items that has to have now, that any single museum representing Korean culture must have. And this has been also exacerbated as a collection items among the younger generation with RM from BTS, when he declared his love for a moonjar. I think the sale of moonjars in Korea has just really spiked a little bit. So
Fantastic.
Yes, they are crossover.
Fantastic. No, pleased to hear it. So I think before we move on to our artists, can we just have a look at Venice? Because one thing that perhaps might be helpful, Rosalie, is to explain why and how and when the Korean pavilion came to the Giardini, and why it came when it did, and how that came about.
Yes, I think generally speaking, so Korea was participating to the Venice Biennale since 1983, but you have to wait for Namjoon Paik working or collaborating with the German pavilion for him to win the Golden Lion in 1993. And again, this is against the backdrop of the Berlin Wall being broken, the Soviet Union breaking down, and then I think it was also the Korean government, obviously, at the time, also putting money towards art. But it was also a moment where the Venice Biennale was also in an introspective kind of movement, where they were realizing that most of their pavilions were very Euro or American-centric, and they were thinking about perhaps diversifying this. And this is the time when Namjoon Paik proposed to the mayor of Venice whether it would be possible to think about creating a pavilion for Korea, that will be not just about South Korean art, but also about North Korea, and how Venice Korean Pavilion would be a sort of an art form that would bridge the two countries, if you'd like. So hence the name actually is not about a South Korean pavilion, it's Korea, full stop. And since then, I think it was the first pavilion that has been added, and the last one that was added as an Asian pavilion. I think there is no more space. And by the way, the Korean pavilion was squeezed between the German and the Japanese pavilion, and it was at the site where you had offices, and it was not the ideal moment, but it was important for Korea to make a statement that it was playing on the international field for contemporary art, and it was at the time when, you know, Gwangju Biennale was coming to the fore. So all of that happened around 1995, and so in 95 they opened their Korean pavilion, and it has been used in various fashions, and I think it has had success both for Korean art as well as architecture. Cho Min-seok, I think, forgot what year, but he also won the Golden Lion for representing North and South Korean architecture, or visions of, which was quite an interesting take as well.
Really interesting, thank you. Rosalie, I want to bring on our two exhibiting artists now, but I wonder how, Rosalie, I mean, you see the work of our four featured artists fitting within your understanding of Korean culture and particularly Korean art.
I felt, thank you very much for sharing the links and for your works. It was really interesting to see them. And I thought it was really interesting that each of you were actually taking the format almost of Hallyu and subverting them to create your own narrative and sharing your own personal experiences, which is really poignant and engaging. And it would be, yeah, that's how I felt about their work. And I think it would be really nice to hear more about your works as well.
So we have with us Garam King and Bongsu Park. So both Korean artists working in London and Seoul, but educated in Paris, London and Seoul. Both of you, I wonder what the impact of Korean art and craft has had on your own practice and development. Bongsu, would you like to start?
So I've been working in Europe since 2009, and I think having distance from Korea, I can see Korea more objectively or differently. For example, I had for this one, I was more using scent and my personal memory, but I worked for a long time about Korean culture, about dream. Yeah. Which is very inspired by my personal, experience. In Korea, actually, we buy and sell dreams, night dreams. So what happened is when I met my Korean friend, who also live in London, we just happened to talk about my last night dream, which was blueberry tomato size. I ate in my dream. I just talked about it, and my friend asked me, can I buy your dream? So if you're Korean, we all know this concept. So I know this concept, but I never sold my dream in my life, but I sold that time. And then couple months later, she called me, because of your dream, I'm pregnant, finally.
So just to
So yeah, it's becoming long story, but that's how I started my project with the dream, and for 7 years now, so far. So I've been collecting people's dream, and during the workshop and Welcome Collection Museum in London, and also Korean Culture Center, and also by online, and also through my solo exhibition in Korea in Seoul. So I've been collected so many people's dream. And so these dreams are actually material for me, and to doing a performance piece and like a dream ritual in a theater place like a Corona Theater. I've been working and collaborating with Jin Cha, and so for me and Korean culture is very closely work a material for me, and also of course as a video artist, then I'm interested and then AI and all video changing, and I'm researching a lot around there. Yeah.
No, fantastic. And I do remember when Stephen, you and I first went to see Bongsu's work, and we were just blown away by the authenticity and the depth of it, but also the technical and the craft brilliance on so many levels. I mean, I urge you to see her dream work as well as the work that we've got, the mirror work that we have here. Garam, your work resonates particularly with some of the work that we've seen in Halleux, as well as the early Puma and work of Pike that we've been looking at throughout. Tell us about some of your early work and how this has developed, perhaps Fantasy Boyfriend and the Agenda Hair Salon and this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm an artist specializing in performance, media arts, and installation work, dealing with social and cultural issues in South Korea. I always felt kind of responsibility to reflect the time I live in. And as growing up in Seoul, I witnessed the rapid changes in economic and also the digital ages. And maybe the global popularity of its culture influenced very naturally my artwork. And you already mentioned about specific artworks, but generally my goals and my intention is creating public spaces to share everyone's ideas. Normally I encouraged people to participate in my artwork and to share and to rethink their preconception, or once they rethink about some phenomenon, it would be a good chance to share new about not only for my artwork, but about the social phenomenon. So, for example, already the video work showed about the Satursday. Actually, the artwork created in 2016 is almost 8 years ago. And at the moment, also the K-beauty was really popular in Asian countries, not worldwide. But at the moment, I wanted to create that kind of culture, in the digital age, because young people want to take a selfie in the museum because it's a good background images for their selfie, because with the artworks, and it's like they express their images, that I'm the kind of person who can enjoy that kind of culture and artwork as well. So I want to create that stage to do the makeup firstly, and then they can express their self-expression. And at the end of the day, I encourage them to upload their selfies Instagram. And you cannot believe it at the moment. Normally, museums do not want to take a selfie in their spaces because they're thought, because you do not think about, especially for the millennial generations, but normally 20 years ago or 30 years ago, museum place is not the place for photography. Normally it's the place and you just watch that artwork and that's it. But I thought that moment is the moment for the Instagram and Facebook, and people wanted to change something, and many museums really want to change that culture but hesitated it. So the reason why I created the artwork, when I asked by the museum to create a new artwork. And other artwork is related to digital age, related to the relationship in digital. So you already mentioned about fantasy boyfriends. Actually, 3 years ago, I made the NFT artwork. It's the token to take a kind of the date token online. So I hired a K-drama actor in Korea, and once you buy the ticket, NFT ticket, and you had get a chance to have the date online, Google Meet. So, yeah, naturally, those kind of change and the digital era is my source for, my artwork. So I really enjoy that, and I still want to make the open stage, and especially for this stage also, I want to ask to the audience to ask us anything about it, and I really love to see the expansion about the K culture or our new generations change. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Garam. It's wonderful to talk with Garam always, because I've never met an artist who is quite so in love with her audience. You know, you are all invited in. You know, there is no precious outcome. You are the artwork, and you are the result. And it is always extremely amusing and very unpredictable and just beautifully executed. So yes, we'd love to talk more. Bongsu, can I ask you a bit about your use of scent? I mean, we've spoken already about the Korean Pavilion and Koo Jong-ah's work and scent. How did we've spoken about your early work and your continuing work with the Dream Library. How has your own journey been using scent in the latest work, Mirror, that we're looking at, and how did that come about?
Yesterday I went to see Koo Jong-ah's Korean Pavilion. I couldn't spend a lot of time, but I saw she collected people's memories, and about 700 stories are related to scent. My practice, for me, I've been collecting people's dream instead of memory actually for a long time, and for this time I started looking into memory, but wanted to start from my personal memory. As I've been working for a long time with dream, when I try to remember my dream and when I listen to people's dream, I was so curious about something happening in your brain when you try to remember your old past, and every time it changes. I wanted to capture the moment and wanted to create a communal experience together, and that scent was trigger for me. And then I wanted to create a scent from my personal memory. Very specific memory, you heard two my memories, but each memory had a scent. I put in the pot, and then I passed one by one to other people. And then of course, some people will have their own memory and during the performance. So this is something different I've done before with the dream, but it's very, very much connected.
I have to add that Bongsu also threw the pots that held the scent, which she just glosses over as if it's easy to do. They were the most beautiful sensory pots. And it's quite interesting watching Mirror as an observer, because of course, as when you are taking part in the performance, the one element you don't have is sight. So all you have is scent, and you hear the stories and you hear the audio. So very complete and very emotional experience, I have to say, for all of us who were there. It was really wonderful. Thank you. I think I have one final question before we put the questions to the floor, because I know there are lots of questions to come. But at our last exhibition, Observing the Human, the artists who we were exhibiting with, we were all working in NFTs. NFT is something that seemed to have a meteoric rise, and now is not so much. Do we see that as a valuable experience? Is it something we might revisit? Tell me, perhaps all of us, what is your feeling about NFTs in the art world?
Yeah, in a technical way, I think the NFT itself is really great, especially for artists, because the big problem for artwork, especially collecting, how we can figure out it's genuine or not. But the thing is, it's very closely connected to the marketplace, the coin marketplaces. Maybe that was the problem. But I think the technology NFT itself is okay. So, and it's also linked to metaverse. I know after the pandemic, the metaverse was really popular at the moment, but not now. But I think still we have many opportunity potential. So maybe in other ways we can develop the method. So it was really good trial for, especially for us, participating in that exhibition, and we wanted to create something different because many artists just make the copy images on NFT and they wanted to sell it. We thought that it's not a good way to make a new artwork with a new media. So yeah, that was really good opportunity. And if there are new version, next generation of NFT, we are very pleased to develop another idea for artwork or exhibitions.
For me, NFT was an exciting thing at the moment, and I think still, and fine art artists can use NFT and as a material. But I think NFT market was used only for making money, and so I didn't think art market on art and didn't receive this NFT possibility and seriously. Maybe in the future, and I don't know. So I actually personally I wanted to create a metaverse space and where people can talk their own dream. And what I try to do is AI generate their images from person's dream, and I made an NFT ticket to enter, and that was I was trying to do. But it's for me it's remaining as a research what you can do with the new media. Yeah.
One thing that was really apparent to the discussions that we had at Observing the Human was how important it was that this technology was primarily in the hands of the artists. Many of these artists would be saying things like, oh, well, we know that the film technology isn't quite brilliant yet, but when it is, we'll absolutely be there. The metaverse isn't quite as perfect as we'd like it to be yet, but when it is, don't worry, we'll be there. And for me, as an art consultant, it's very reassuring and you just think, well, thank God for the artists, frankly, because whatever happens, they know what they're doing. Rosalie, do you have a take on the NFT and the whole?
I think it's very difficult for me to talk as coming from the museum background. I think from the museum's perspective, we saw this almost as a novelty coming to the fore, but where the sort of infrastructure from the museum's point of view in terms of acquiring or showing them was not really there. There's also to do with some of the copyright issues and things like that. So I think once the technologies are done and those kind of sort of the first kind of feedbacks is being taken into account, the next perhaps groups of whatever it was, either NFT or something else, will be a better sort of appropriate and used. And I think some of those elements will be coming to the fore more and more. But yeah.
Steve, do you have a view on the whole NFT thing?
I think it was a rather extraordinary thing. I always feel very annoyed about the fact that the people who started NFTs decided to drop it on the art market instead of something else at the beginning. So I had to spend hours of my life every week explaining to clients and to other people what they were and why they should or shouldn't buy them. I mean, and really what it came down to in the end is that there was absolutely no interest in the content of NFTs for the market. The driver of value in the NFT market was rarity, and that's it. Right. And so people were not collecting it. And actually, you don't really want people buying and selling things fast. That aspect of it isn't useful. The really exciting things I think about NFT are the smart contracts and the authentication on the blockchain as part, which happened before, which is existing before. There were startups doing this before NFTs anyway. So that one of the ways that you know you can own something more ephemeral, whether that be a performance, whether it's video, whether it's other things that can be easily repeated, in order for the artist to actually get, paid for making important and interesting work, that you have a certificate, you have a token, and you have the classic provenance that you would do even from an 18th century painting, and all of those things together mean that for definite you own something, and hopefully the great thing about NFTs is that smart contracts mean that artists can potentially be paid when the secondary market comes in, and that's where I think they'll be interesting.
I agree.
And as you said, it's about things not being ready, and it's about the fact that it was, instead of being something that could be useful in all sorts of different things, I mean, same with things like concert tickets, where bands could therefore get paid on the resale market for concert tickets, etc. It ended up having to be the art market that had to metabolize it, and it got out of hand, let's be honest. So, yeah.
But it's not the end yet. And on that note, I know there are a few questions in the audience. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes.
This was really for sort of Stephen, although we mentioned it sort of briefly during the break, Stephen, about why Seoul has sort of exploded in terms of a marketplace for art as opposed to Shanghai, Hong Kong, or Tokyo. Is there something particular about the Korean market that has marked it out as a more open forum for international exchange of art over those other places?
So the question is, yes, why particularly Korea and Seoul as the place for the art market above Shanghai and others?
Well, it's all of the stars aligning in different ways, but I think the most important one was something that Rosalie said, at the beginning of this Q&A, which is that the government invested and promoted art at a time when all the other centres starting to have other serious problems. As we were talking about earlier, Japan back in 1989 was by far ahead of any other market, and the first really international art fair happened right in the middle of the great stock market crash of that year, and the government went on all media and said it would be unpatriotic for people to spend money on art at this time, and that art fair fell apart. Not ever, didn't have another good art fair in Tokyo for another 30 years, so Tokyo also, 5 hours from anywhere, apart from possibly Seoul, but certainly from anywhere in China and from Singapore and from other places. But if it hadn't been for the security changes in China itself, the censorship in China, the national security laws in Hong Kong, and if it hadn't in Singapore been something that really a lot of the wealthy middle class people in Singapore just it hasn't become fashionable in that society in the same way to collect art en masse. It's not that nobody does it, but it's not, it doesn't have the same cachet that it does in New York, for example. So it's a lot of different things, but I think, it's great. And actually, having been involved in the endless wrangling over years of people trying to work out where the best place to have the centre of the art market, at least on that side of the world, that Korea has a lot going for it in terms of, you know, stability and democracy and you know, the kind of openness that you need. You know, you can't sit in a censorship world as you do in Beijing and Singapore and Hong Kong and be a free artist, and that's a big deal, I think.
Big deal. Thank you.
I had a question, but was more or less the same. I mean, you replied because my question was about speaking from Italy, where there's not so much support, public support for art. There is, but it's not enough for the amount of artists, contemporary artists we have. So it's not easy for an Italian artist to be shown all around the world thanks to the support of some public grants or whatever. My question was regarding this. So how is the government, what is the role of the government in this growth that is happening in the Korean market? But I think you replied.
Well, I don't know. I think actually you might find, Garam and Bongsu, you also have a view on the role of the government in enabling Korean artists and, you know, they're supporting Korean artists.
You mean Art Council funding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I'm not sure. I know about the answer about your question, but in my opinion, I've got many opportunities by government, and there are many fundraising for exhibitions abroad. Especially, they support abroad exhibition rather than just in-house. I mean, in Korean exhibition, I mean, the amount of money and the opportunity. So I think it's the kind of government strategies, not only in the art field, also the other industries. They increase all the companies to expand their business outside, and they spend lots of money. And I think that's because of, our country, very small and cute size company, and even divided into north and south. And maybe government, the policy, because we have very limitation of the population, limitation of the size of the country. So I think it's the strategy since especially 90s. I think Rosalie had this study about the government strategies about it.
I was going to say, actually, in terms of the support from the government, it's actually double-edged. Because you have to, initially when there was a support from the government, there was it's almost like a pecking order. So if you were in the sort of rota of the Korean government and the sort of network, you would have it a bit easier than others. And I think this is the learning from the first generations of grants, second generations of grants, is that the government is good to support the arts. We are all for that because we all need it. But at the same time, I think what they learn is to take a back role rather than them just being the first one to say, okay, you will be going to this, or we will organize this. They will just now try to find intermediaries that will be slightly more an expert in the field and maybe level their sort of selection, say, for example, to where to send, who to send. And so that you provide those monies, but the selections and the ideas and the distribution is done through intermediaries. And so the way the grants are being distributed have changed over the course of time. And but I have to say that working as a curator in a sort of massive museum with, we are just in the Asia department, we are 25 curators and we are all vying for a very small budget. And so when I see the amount of monies available for Korea, and it's not just for the art, but also for craft, for translations, for libraries, they are not huge funds sometimes, but there are many. So you can try in different sort of doors. So there is monies to find, and this is really something that is very important for the arts to develop.
No, really, really interesting. I think what we might do is, I know the ECC has some delicious drinks and refreshments for us, so perhaps if we finish our discussion over a drink together. I mean, we've looked at some of the reasons why South Korea is leading the way in contemporary digital art. We've looked at the work of some of the most influential practicing and emerging artists today, but also looked at the context of this in the context of Venice and globally and further afield. So please, I'd like you to join me in thanking our really wonderful and extremely talented and bright and clever panel. Also the EEC for hosting us here and looking after us so well. But so if you can join me in saying 감사합니다.
Thank you, Sasha. Moderator.